This is Vietnam War, a summary. This goes along with some fill-in-the-blank notes. Please pause after each slide to fill in the notes. This is a very brief summary of what's going on or what happened in the Vietnam War. Before the actual Vietnam War, France had been actually defeated by the Vietnamese. They had tried to regain their colony after World War II and had been defeated by Ho Chi Minh and his rebels, trying to gain their own freedom. The United States begins getting involved with military advisors. Dien Bien Phu is the actual battle where the French are surrounded and defeated in 1954. Fast forward to 1964, 10 years later, the United States is slowly getting more and more and more involved until the USS Maddox is off the coast of North Vietnam in the Gulf of Tonkin. The Vietnam situation is getting worse. American troops are slowly increasing. There's an incident called the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Late at night, there allegedly was some sort of attack on the USS Maddox. It wasn't destroyed. Nobody died. Just some shots fired. Allegedly a torpedo boat attacked it. Now, those reports have been confirmed by eyewitnesses, but there's not been much evidence of it occurring. Regardless, what happens is the United States, led by Lyndon B. Johnson, says that the United States is under attack. Congress passes what's called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which basically gives LBJ a blank check to fight the war. Now the United States is officially involved in the war. No declaration of war, just a resolution to spend as much money as Johnson needs to combat the problems in Vietnam. Okay, pause. Eventually, up to 500,000 American troops are involved. The draft fills the military. There's not enough volunteers to fight, so the draft is used to fill up the military and to fill that 500,000 roster in Vietnam. The draft had been going on since 1948 because of fears of the Cold War. Until Tet, which is the Vietnamese New Year, the United States looked like it was winning. But on January 31st, 1968, the Tet Offensive was launched. This was a coordinated attack on 12 South Vietnamese cities. This really shocked the United States. Again, sort of the national narrative was that the United States was winning and that the war was nearly over. I'm sorry, the conflict was nearly over. The Viet Cong, who are the communists, were more powerful than the United States thought. This was the single event that turned public opinion. Before and after the Tet Offensive, you can see poll numbers, and you can see the public opinion definitely turns against being involved in the war. Questions of why are we even fighting this war outnumber statements about containment of communism. Pause. On the home front, there's a lot of controversy. There are protests all over the country. Hawks, who are people who are have come to the conclusion that the United States should be in the war, versus Doves, who want peace. Those are nicknames for groups of people. In 1970, there's a Kent State shooting. Kent State University in Ohio had a student protest that turned violent. The National Guard that was there to put down the unrest and to make sure that there was no violence ended up shooting into a crowd of students, killing 4 and wounding 9. This became a rallying point for even more protests. Rewinding a little bit here, LBJ, after the Tet Offensive, this should have gone in the previous slide, LBJ is very unpopular. Despite all of his domestic successes, despite all of the Great Society programs that he has passed, the involvement in Vietnam just overshadows everything. So he determines after the Tet Offensive not to even run for the presidential election of 1968. This opens up the field. Democrats like Robert Kennedy start running, and Robert Kennedy is actually assassinated during this, the brother of JFK. He's assassinated in late spring of 1968. So a Republican, Richard Nixon, wins in 1968. He has a secret he says, during the campaign, a secret plan to end the Vietnam War. Once he's elected, he begins a process called Vietnamization, basically training Vietnamese to take over Americans and to use more bombings as opposed to ground troops. He also begins peace talks. He'll actually use a triangulated series of peace talks between the Soviet Union, Communist China, and Vietnam to create peace eventually, but not before an enormous amount of bombing occurs. Finally, in 1972, the Paris Peace Accords ends the American involvement in the war. The last U.S. personnel are gone by 1973. In next chapter, we'll talk about Watergate a little bit, but Nixon resigns and his Vice President Gerald Ford is president. By 1975, North Vietnam defeats South Vietnam, who is fighting without the United States, and unites all of Vietnam into a communist country, thus ending the Vietnam War, and it is still communist today.